All right, time for another hot take episode. I read your hot takes and react to them. Always get some interesting discussions. So, yeah, let's just jump into it. Hot take. Mike McCarthy should stay in Dallas. He's a good head coach. I like this hot take. I wanted to start off with it because it's an interesting one, right? Because Mike McCarthy is someone who I do feel like has done a good job at consistently getting Dallas to the postseason. And in fact, I usually kind of early on for the Cowboys feel like, I don't know. I'm not too sold on this team. And they almost always overperform in the regular season, only to then underperform in the postseason. The reality is the postseason record isn't great, and it's kind of been that way for a bit. Even, McCarthy had some tough losses back when he was with the Packers as well. So it is possible to, I think saying he's a good head coach is fair. I just don't know if he's an amazing head coach, but I also think it's probably fair to say that it's possible he gets blamed for stuff that isn't really his fault. Like in that playoff game, Dak Prescott kept throwing it to the other team. Like as a head coach, at the end of the day, players have to make the plays. So it's an interesting hot take. I don't think he's a terrible head coach. I also do think you could probably do better, though. So good hot take there. Another hot take, which is one I see a lot, actually. This is maybe it's just because I've maybe been lower on Goff than some other people have, but Jared Goff is way better than given credit for. I think this just depends on what circles are you in. Where are you looking at? I think in some circles, it's possible Jared Goff gets zero credit and people act like he's a bum. And then in some circles, people act like Jared Goff is an elite quarterback. And I don't really think either are the case. I think Jared Goff's a good quarterback. I think one of the issues with someone like Goff and why it becomes a difficult thing to evaluate is if Jared Goff has a 7 out of 10 game, if that's what he does, he has enough weapons around him that's going to turn into a 9 out of 10 production game. And that's not a fault in Jared Goff, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a good thing that he has weapons, and a 7 out of 10 game is still a good game. So, you should be still coming away from that saying, wow, Jared Goff is great. The issue is you're going to get a subsect of people that look at it and say, wow, 9 out of 10 production, Jared Goff is amazing. And I think you're going to get some people that really push back against that argument, which is why things can get so muddled. I think Jared Goff, PFF graded him as the 11th highest graded quarterback this season. He currently had the 7th highest graded passer rating. So I think that's a part of it. I also should mention that, again, PFF is not the end-all be-all by any means, but just using it as an external, source, so I don't just give my own opinions on things. You also have to look at the, during the playoffs, there's been 10 games this postseason, and the highest graded quarterback has won 8 out of the 10 games. 8 times out of the 10, the quarterback that had the highest PFF grade won. The 2 instances where the quarterback with the lowest grade won was Jared Goff in the divisional round and Jared Goff in the wild card round. So, I think Jared Goff's a good quarterback, but do I think he's way underrated? No, I don't. I think Jared Goff we view Jared Goff how we should view Jared Goff. A good quarterback who probably needs to be in a great situation to succeed, but if he is in a great situation, can really succeed. Hot take. Todd Bowles is too conservative to continue being a head coach. Well, I would kind of disagree on this one because Andy Reid's pretty conservative. He's a great head coach, right? So, while I do think Todd Bowles has some inherent flaws as a head coach, and I still don't know if he's a long-term answer at head coach for Tampa Bay. I think him being conservative is definitely a negative aspect, but you can be a successful head coach even if you are too conservative, and he has upped his game a lot in fourth down decision-making. Like last year, he would never be a guy who down 14, after scoring a touchdown, would go for 2. So he has gotten somewhat more analytically inclined there, but definitely it's a negative, and it might be what hinders him from ever being a great head coach. Another Tampa Bay one, Buccaneers will regress next season, despite having money to re-sign star players and get guys from free agency. Well, I'm kind of with you, actually, even though I am a Tampa Bay fan. I don't know if this is going to be a thing where I feel like a lot of times when teams, see a team go from not great to good, they assume, okay, well, now next year you're going to be awesome. Not exactly how that works. Now, I do think there's things working in Tampa Bay's favor. The fact that they now have played together for a whole season. You could, similar to how when Brady came by the first year, didn't really get going until the end of the season. And the next season, they won it was, I believe, 13 games actually in the regular season before getting knocked out in the playoffs. So you could see something like that happening. At the same time, though, the re-sign star players thing is key. They have a ton of star players they have to re-sign, and so even though they have the money to do that, I actually don't know if they even have money to get guys from free agency. So I don't know if there's a much higher ceiling than what we saw this season from them. Some regress, I'm not so sure, but I could see a scenario where they don't improve the way you might expect. Couple Jalen Hurts comments. We have Jalen Hurts is not a top 5 quarterback, barely a top 10 quarterback. And then there's, some other things there. But, also if Lamar either wins MVP or Super Bowl, he should be considered the second best quarterback behind Mahomes, obviously, in the league. Anything lower than that is a disgrace. Josh Allen might now be the most overhated quarterback after the season. Strongly agree about the Josh Allen point, and we'll get to that when we get to some Josh Allen takes in a second. If Lamar wins I don't know if either wins MVP or Super Bowl. I think you could still argue Burrow or Allen if Lamar loses in the conference championship. But if he wins a Super Bowl, yeah, you kind of have to give him the number 2 quarterback. I think that would be reasonable. The Jalen Hurts one is interesting. So I actually think that's where people probably have him now, is top 10, but not top 5. This comment is interesting, though. Jalen Hurts was never that good, which is an interesting take. Again, the production was great, but as I mentioned, production and value isn't always the same thing. And there was a lot of, deep balls to A.J. Brown that A.J. Brown was able to come down with. I think he was still good. I think I would still say I think he still is good. I don't know if maybe he did get overhyped after year 1. In fact, I feel like that's pretty fair to say, but I still think Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, and I don't know if he's a top 5, but I agree that he's still top 10. And I think he had a top 5 season last year, even with maybe we overhyped parts of it. That's how I would view it. But I like the hot take. I think it's fun. As I mentioned, some Josh Allen takes. Hot take. Also, I love how half these comments specify hot take. Like, yeah, I know it's a hot take. Like, that's what we're doing here. Yeah, I got it. Appreciate you specifying, though. Josh Allen is a mediocre quarterback. Sure, he has a rocket arm and is mobile, but he's not the smartest. Arm punt and hero ball king. Crown emoji. Listen, I don't fully disagree that he's not the smartest. Like, I think I would definitely say that, Mahomes is smarter. I would say a Burrow is smarter. I would say a Lamar is smarter. Like, I think that, out of the kind of elite quarterbacks, I think that he definitely gets himself into trouble sometimes, but usually he gets himself out of trouble. Like, Josh Allen, if Josh Allen's a mediocre, who's a mediocre starting quarterback? Are we going to say, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example. Is Daniel Jones a mediocre quarterback? Like, do you think that if Daniel Jones was on the Bills, they make it through the divisional round? No, they're not even a playoff team, and not even close, right? Josh Allen, I think, is fantastic. He was Pro Football, again, not to keep using PFF, but I use them as hey, someone agrees with me usually in this scenario. I'm not just speaking like a crazy person. They had him graded as the number 1 quarterback this season. I agree. I gave him my MVP vote that I don't have. I think he was incredible what he did, and the turnovers are, yes, he threw interceptions, but a lot of that is luck, and he was really unlucky this season when it comes to that. This is the Bills should trade Josh Allen while he's still considered elite. No, I don't agree. I think they should keep Josh Allen. For one thing, if you have a quarterback who you're like, I'm not sure if this guy is still elite or not, you should still keep that guy typically, because it's so hard to get an elite quarterback. It's worth the risk, especially when you're already paying him what's 1 extra year. I guess the upside is if you think he's going to fall off a cliff and suck next year, well, then you could get a few first-round picks for him, but I'd still rather have the elite quarterback. That's still worth the risk, in my opinion. So even if I were to entertain that maybe Josh Allen isn't elite, which I just won't. Again, I've watched every snap of Josh Allen this season. He's really good. The Bills' offense has trouble. I feel like I had these same arguments with Lamar a couple years ago when everyone said that Lamar sucks, and I'm like, no, he's really good. He doesn't have receivers, right? Josh Allen's really good. He doesn't have a great offensive line, and all he has is Diggs and Kincaid to throw to. Like he's doing his best here. Disagree with the comment, but again, they are fun. I appreciate them. Let's get to a wild one that nobody on this will disagree with. Here's one my buddy has. Eli is better than Peyton. Yeah, I think Peyton Manning was a little better than Eli Manning. I think so. Perhaps. I guess, Eli was better at maybe, winning Super Bowls against the Patriots. He did that very well. But no, I think pretty much everyone agrees. Peyton Manning was the better player. Another hot take, and again, it specifies hot take, so we know, Jordan Love choked. Yeah, I think that's fair, right? I mean, again, what is choking, right? How do we define choking? But like, yeah, Jordan Love in the fourth quarter of a playoff game played significantly worse than he played in the first three quarters. Like, that's reasonable. He missed some throws, probably could have had a second interception earlier in the fourth quarter that was dropped, and then he had the turnover at the end there. So, like, yeah, I mean, Jordan Love is good enough to get to the point where you can choke in the end of a playoff game. I think that's fair. At the end of the day, you know, Mahomes is choked at the end of playoff games. Brady's choked at the end of playoff games. Like, I don't think it's like, oh, he sucks because he had a bad fourth quarter in a playoff game. But, like, yeah, I mean, if, you know, in a couple years, if he does it again, people will get on him. He's still new enough that no one wants to, say anything. But, yeah, you're right. I think it's fair. Hot take. Again, thank you for specifying this is the hot take. Mac Jones can be fixed. Love this take. Kinda. I mean, I'll say this about Mac Jones. Like, in fact, Kyle and I on the podcast kind of compared him to Baker Mayfield prior to this season when Mayfield got his, act together and started playing well again. Of like, hey, sometimes a guy just has a good rookie year and doesn't do a lot else after that. I do think with Mac Jones, if you're a team like the Atlanta Falcons, let's say you don't trade up to get a quarterback and you can't get a big ticket guy, like, I still think it'd be insane to just go out, get Mac Jones and say, yep, that's our guy. But, like, Tampa Bay, they went out and got Baker, but they also had Kyle Trask, and they were like, okay, let's see if one of these two guys hits, and if not, well, we'll stink and get a good draft pick, right? I think, for me, if I'm Carolina, for example, I think Carolina would do a lot of good to add Mac Jones to their roster, and get him as a backup. Like, that would make sense to me. So, I think the issue is, like, how worth it is it to go out and try and actually get Mac Jones, right? Like, how worth it is it to try and fix him? And, like, certainly you shouldn't go into the whole season with that being your only option, but could he be a good plan B? Yeah, I think so. There is a potential for him to be fixed. I wouldn't say the odds are great, but they're definitely not zero. Another Jordan Love one. Jordan Love will win MVP next season. This is always the kiss of death. Is the dark horse MVP candidate. Every year, the dark horse MVP candidate ends up being a complete bust, right? Trevor Lawrence was this year's dark horse MVP candidate. I remember Baker Mayfield in Cleveland one year was a dark horse MVP candidate, and then he had a horrible season. Jameis Winston one year was a dark horse MVP candidate. He had a horrible season. It almost always ends up, there's probably been an example or two where it's worked out, but it's almost a running gag on the podcast how the dark horse MVP candidate always ends up sucking. So, you've cursed Jordan Love. In all seriousness, though, again, this is just where some of the hot takes are a little bit tough because it's like, I can see the possibility. And, like, at the end of the day, if I get 10 hot takes saying this player who has a chance to win MVP next season will win MVP next season, one of those guys is going to end up having an MVP caliber season. But, like, would I put his odds over Lamar or Mahomes or Allen or Burrow or even Aaron Rodgers, depending on how healthy he is? No. Do I think Jordan Love could be an MVP caliber quarterback at a certain point in his career, though? It's certainly possible, but the same thing I said about Lawrence. Lawrence ended last year really strong, and I said, okay, now I want to see it for a whole season. That's how I feel about Love. Okay, you've ended this season strong, now I want to see it for a whole season. Some Trevor Lawrence hot takes. I'm going to run through. There's a few of these, so we'll get through a couple of them. Some positive, some negative. Hot take: next season, Trevor Lawrence will be the worst quarterback in his division. Now that's a scorcher, right? Definitely some, because again, you got Anthony Richardson. Okay, he has to play well. Will Levis, I'm assuming, will be the Titans guy. He has to play well. And then CJ Stroud. I mean, yeah, I think that's not crazy, but there's a lot of things has to happen for the other two quarterbacks to play better than Trevor Lawrence. But again, it's a hot take show. You're not supposed to give a cold take here. Trevor Lawrence will have a huge bounce back year in 2024 and get the Jaguars to win 11 plus games. And finally, the Jaguars will finish last in their division next year. I don't know I think a lot of people are going to be predicting the Titans to be a worst team in football candidate next season. So, got a lot of work to do to finish last in their division. And just in general, I don't know, maybe I just had lower expectations than Jacksonville. I feel like Jacksonville definitely did not have a great, the end of the season was terrible. I watched some of those. I watched all of Trevor Lawrence's games. He was a different quarterback in the second half. He was not healthy. And when he was playing through injuries, would create more injuries. On top of this, guys were not getting open consistently enough for him. So my kind of take is every quarterback looks bad when you have when you don't have guys to throw to. I think if they can get, maybe a third receiver to really kind of, again, try to make that better, they put resources into the receiving core, but I don't know if Ridley did exactly what they were hoping for. And then I think when Ridley kind of finally started getting it going, I think Lawrence was banged up. Like, I don't hold that against him too much. So I agree with the second one, which is I do think Lawrence will probably have a bounce back year and get the Jaguars to win 11 games. That feels more likely than him falling off a cliff. I think he was overhyped heading into the year, and now he's gotten overhated after he didn't, live up to those expectations. But I thought he played really well at the beginning of the year when he was healthy. So that's how I view it. Final hot take. This is a fun one. Fire Dan Campbell and hire Ben Johnson as head coach. Clarifies just for video's sake, and I don't really want to lose Ben to another team this offseason. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, I usually like the hot takes where you agree to it, but either way, it's a fun discussion to be had. So, because I guess I can see the logic, right? If you are a believer in the real positive of this team is Ben Johnson, who has been an amazing offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. If you think he's the guy and he's the main thing you look at, well, would you want to make sure you keep him? And why let a great coach out the door if he goes away and now the offensive calling isn't quite as good as it once was? Well, then you could be in some trouble here. I think the issue is if you fire Dan Campbell, the city of Detroit will riot. They will have an actual riot, and you will have to make sure you're out of the city. Maybe leave the country for a bit if you decide to do that. Like, it's never happening, not happening. No way Dan Campbell's gonna go. I get the logic behind it in theory, but I think Dan Campbell's really good. And personally, I think even as much as I like Ben Johnson, I think I'd rather lose Ben Johnson than Dan Campbell. But it's a fun one. It is a fun one. So yeah, those are the hot takes. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.